Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday Tea Time for St Andrews Golf Magazine. Sorry. Um, this week I'm joined by Elizabeth Bethel of Pro Golf Now. Unfortunately, Les is having trouble joining the hangout, so hopefully he'll be able to join us in the next few moments. This week we're discussing the LPGA with last week's event, the Kingsmill Championship, and this week the Airbets Classic, which is in Alabama. We'll also be looking back at the PGA Tour and European Tour from last week, wins at the different ends of the age spectrum, and one really experienced winner and one completely inexperienced winner, and also looking ahead to this week's massive event on the European Tour, the BMW PGA Championship, and briefly the Colonial event, Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth, Texas. But to start this week, last week, Lizette Salas, another outstanding winner on the LPGA Tour, Elizabeth, the Kingsmill Championship.
Just absolutely a wonderful win for Lizette. You know, this is the third Solheim Cup rookie from Team USA to have a win this year. Jessica Korda won the Pure Silk. Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Korda won the Pure Silk. Lexi Thompson won the Kraft Nabisco. And Salas has been coming along. We all knew she was going to win. The question was when. And so when she was finally able to close the deal on Sunday, I was just absolutely delighted. But I really think we need to kind of connect the experience that those three players had last summer at the Solheim Cup with their ability to mobilize their game and really deliver the win. The Solheim Cup changed them.
It certainly did, and it's almost that week where Europe were victorious has almost given the Americans the final shot in the arm, if you like, to really, really dedicate themselves, come out and compete and win. And maybe it could be the biggest thing that's happened to American women's golf for many, many years, actually, because you've had the Asians come over and dominate, and now the Europeans are starting to show that they can compete at the highest level. And it's just that competition that wasn't there for so long is there now, and maybe that's the motivating factor for a lot of these young ladies who are coming out and winning now.
Well, and I think a lot of people are now seeing the end of the Inbee Park reign. Park hasn't won since last year at the U.S. Open,
yeah.
And she's playing a good game. I mean, because she's a fine golfer, but she's not playing a winning game. And suddenly there's a new kind of energy coming from the Americans. They want the Solheim Cup back,
yeah.
But even before that, they're beginning to play a more aggressive, dominating game, seeing that they can defeat Inbee and the other Asians. Sure.
Yeah, I think
Americans are on the roll.
It is. I mean, it's similar on the PGA Tour as well now, with the young Americans coming through and winning, Jordan Spieth, etc. And that also has a motivating factor in September with the Ryder Cup. They're desperate to get it back after what happened at Medina. So I think it's a similar situation, and I think it's great to see another star in the making as one. It's just amazing week after week on the LPGA. It's a shame we don't get to see too much of it over here. There are some events now, but not week to week. And there's a good interview in Bunkered magazine this month. I know it's advertising a rival magazine, but I will do it. Where Mike One talks about how he has helped reinvigorate the LPGA Tour, and there was a time 4 or 5 years ago where the number of events were dwindling and the prize funds were down, and there was no real star in American women's golf, dominating by Asians and the likes of Lorena Ochoa, Annika Sorensen before that, and it was really struggling. But now there's a lot more events. You've got the International Crown coming up soon, and the LPGA is flourishing, and these young ladies are really turning it on and performing at the highest level.
Yes. And Lizette is such a special case. I mean, one of the subtexts of American culture right now is the growth of the Latino population. It's now, I believe, larger than the African American population. So it is, and in some parts of the country, it has an elective majority. And
Yeah.
so there's this new there's this new demographic that's emerging quite outside golf, but Lizette Salas is a part of that demographic. And for me, that's a tremendously exciting shift. Women's golf is no longer something that's dominated by white girls in the United States. But in fact, women of color are coming along, and Lizette is leading that. She's in the vanguard of that process. I mean, another person who's going to come along behind her, I truly believe, is Cheyenne Woods. And she just needs some time to kind of stabilize her. But Cheyenne will also uh, begin to play competitively in the next 2 or 3 years. And there's another young woman on the Symetra Tour named Selena Parks, who's also looking very good, a young African American woman. So I see Lizette as bringing some diversity to American golf that it's needed, and it's very welcome change for me.
Yeah, I think that's great because in the years since Tiger Woods burst onto the scene in the mid '90s, um, where this sport that was very elitist, or viewed as very elitist, um, everybody was waiting for that next great young, or even a group of young African American golfers, and it just hasn't happened in the men's game. It really hasn't happened. I mean, Vijay Singh, obviously,
No.
but he was a much more established golfer anyway. So you haven't seen that, and still, even in the lower level tours, you don't see it, which is a real shame. But maybe with the foundation that Tiger has, uh, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, you will see that. But it is good to see such diversity on the LPGA. And yeah, it just makes it a much better sport because you have competition from all over the world, and not just all over the world, but all over the country that the tournaments are staged in and the tours are on. So I think it's a great thing, and I think the LPGA is the example for every tour in the world how fewer events is better, a shorter season is better, more competition. You have all the best players playing 75% of the time. There's players that you do see week after week after week playing, and I think that's borne out because it's a shorter season. You sometimes have off weeks in between events, and I think it really is proving that the LPGA is a great tour this year.
The LPGA, I don't want to short the LET because the LET has exactly the same qualities.
Yeah.
It's a global tour. Its players are international, and in the same way, those two tours bring together or unify women's golf around the world. I'd like to see more LET LPGA co-sanctioned events.
Oh, definitely. I think
They
that
have one or
is,
two.
you have to say that's something which the LET needs to do. Is firstly, the major championships need to be universal. At the moment, only Evian and the Women's British Open are classed as majors on the LET, so LET players struggle to get into a lot of the majors during the year.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have as much access, and there's not quite the incentive because week to week the events don't count for qualifying for, unless you're up in the world rankings, they don't really count specifically for the majors. And I think that's one thing they need to do. I also think something actually going on to an interview that I've done with Craig Cann, the Chief Communications Officer of the LPGA, which will be in June's edition, which I talked to him about, was a WGC series for women, and with the Rolex rankings, it's perfect for that. And then you have the players from all over the world, all the tours, competing, and that really would help all the tours develop, particularly
Yes,
the
it would.
LET. You know, the LET does need to up its game significantly, I would say, because it isn't always the easy option to go to the LPGA because of the finance involved. At least if you're a European Tour player, you have a great financial thing to fall back on anyway, because the European Tour is so
Yeah.
rich. With the LET, the vast difference between the LET prize fund and the LPGA
Yes.
it is vast. It's massive. So there is quite a difference. So yeah, I would say, and I'm looking forward to this week, the Airburst Classic, which is a Robert Trent Jones design, or Robert Trent Jones trail in Alabama. And as we were discussing before the program began, Jennifer Johnson came out on top last year, a relatively unknown player, but the year before you had Stacey Lewis victorious, and it's another reasonably strong field this week as well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see who wins. You know, if the pattern holds, we'll have yet another new winner. Now, who will it be? Who's on the top of the list? I mean, we know that Stacey Lewis will be competitive. Of course she will.
Yeah.
I keep watching Jenny Shin, who's really, she's a very spunky little player. And I keep thinking Jenny Shin is going to do it. She's going to come through. And she didn't do so well at the Kingsmill. And then I'm also watching an American player, Jarena Pillar, who plays out of Dallas-Fort Worth, and who's very, very strong, but like Lizette Salas, couldn't quite close the deal. She just can't quite close the deal.
Was she not also on the women's the American team last year at the Solheim Cup?
Yes, she was.
So
yes, she was.
And you know, the inspiration from Lizette Salas and Lexi Thompson and Jessica Korda really is there for her to take on board and go forward. You know,
she could. I could see her doing it. She'll play one or two strong rounds and then she'll back off. And this has been going on all season. But you know, once she sees Lizette up front, she and Lizette appears in the rankings and experience and the Kingsmill in performance. So I see Pillar as an unnamed possibility, because we always tend to look at the top. Well, will Stacey win it now? Maybe. But maybe there's somebody else. I mean, the LPGA's been so dynamic this year. One new winner after another. So put your money on Pillar.
Well,
I forget, you don't bet.
As you know, I don't bet. It's just too unpredictable.
It's unpredictable.
If I bet on the football on Saturday, I probably would have lost my money, actually, I think. But so last week also we had the Byron Nelson Championship, which another Fool's Time winner on the PGA Tour, Brendan Todd, overcame Mike Weir, who was back in contention. David Duval had a great first day, but Brendan Todd, I mean, the difference between the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour is these first-time winners or new winners on the LPGA are already stars. You can tell they're strong, they've got experience. But the PGA Tour at the moment, week after week, it's unknown player after unknown player, apart from Sawgrass where Martin Kaymer won. But it's not good for golf. We need these stars to start stepping up and winning, and maybe it'll happen at the majors. But I mean, it is really, really strange how these unknown players are coming out and winning such important tournaments. But opposite end of the age spectrum and experience spectrum on the European Tour, the Spanish Open,
Yeah.
Miguel Angel Jimenez, another win at the age of 50 following his debut Champions Tour win a few weeks ago, and he prevailed in a three-man playoff. And it's just incredible to see that the guy just never seems to run out of energy following his marriage, and just it's incredible. And he's actually now not too far away from qualifying for the Ryder Cup in September, which when you think you probably expect him to be a vice captain again, it's quite amazing, really. And it just shows how if you keep yourself reasonably fit, and you would never say that Miguel Angel Jimenez is fit, but if you keep yourself reasonably fit, you can keep going well into your 50s, and I expect him to really dominate the Champions Tour because he doesn't have a major, but he's won so many big tournaments on the European Tour. And it will be, I think I would venture to say he will win several senior majors if he can still contend in the main event on the main tour. It's outstanding to see, really. So,
What do you know about his marriage, Matt?
well,
Do
I
you have
know that
any juicy?
she's considerably younger than him. That's obvious by the pictures. That's
Well,
quite
that
obvious.
doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise me either. Um, yeah, she's a blonde, beautiful girl.
Oh,
Obviously dazzled by his good looks, I would imagine, or maybe the checkbook. I don't know. But yeah,
naughty.
talking of Jimenez, he's a past champion at Wentworth. This week, the BMW PGA Championship celebrates its 60th anniversary. It's the biggest tournament on the European Tour outside the majors, and is our equivalent of Sawgrass in many ways. And it has a great history dating back to Arnold Palmer, Peter Allis, all the great European players have won this. So Ballesteros, Lyle, Faldo's won it 4 times, Monty, Langer's won it twice, and Olafable as well. So we've had, all the great players have won the PGA Championship at one time or another. And this week another strong field. Not quite as strong as I'd like to see. There's no American star in the field, which is again disappointing. But obviously this week in America you've got the Colonial event, and that's big pulling of power. And with Memorial coming up as well, and obviously the US Open, players are taking this week off. So it's a shame, but Martin Keimer is looking to completely unique double of Players Championship and BMW PGA. And Matteo Manassero is defending the title. And again, we've got a lot of the top European players and some of the top South Africans. Ernie Els is playing as well. So it's a strong field, and another chance for Rory McIlroy to take that one step further and win. But his record around Wentworth isn't great, as it wasn't around Sawgrass, and he did finish top 10. So maybe this week's the week, but I would venture to say it won't be. Lee Westwood has come second here twice before, lost in a playoff to Luke Donald for the world #1 spot a few years back now, and his form has been really good. Another good finish at Sawgrass, following on from Malaysia and the Masters. So I would expect him to contend. Luke Donald, unfortunately, hasn't had the best of years. He had a good finish at Harbour Town, but he does have an outstanding record at Wentworth, obviously winning twice and finishes second as well. So he could be somebody to look out for. But I think that Justin Rose, he's come very, very close. He's come second twice at Wentworth. He's a US Open champion. He's over his injury problems. And I think this week could be his week to take that one step further and win at Wentworth. Local boy. So I think it's a good opportunity for him to take that step and and win again. Colonial, you have another decent field on a historic golf course. It's just a shame from my point of view that the PGA Tour and the European Tour don't get together and say, look, because the European Tour doesn't play opposite Sawgrass. it's an off week. So why don't
Mm.
the PGA Tour just sorry, just alternate the events and have Colonial last week, Byron Nelson this week. Byron Nelson doesn't get a very deep field, um, and just enable some of the top Americans to come over and play. Obviously, easy access to London, Heathrow, and the many airports around. So I think it would be good to see a stronger American presence at such an historic event. Sorry. Um, So yeah, I think it's another great week coming up on both tours. We're edging ever closer to the US Open, the US Women's Open, and as I said before, Elizabeth is going to be there for us. And with this dynamic season on the LPGA, it really must be now. The juices must be flowing, and you must be looking forward to it, Elizabeth.
I am so excited about that. I think that the Open, the Open is the oldest of the women's tournaments,
Yeah.
and this year is a very special year because of the way the USGA has combined the men's and the women's events and put them back to back on the same golf course. And so, it what a privilege it is to be able to be there and to provide some coverage and commentary. I'm just really looking forward to it.
Well, I just
We'll
to
do
explain.
a we'll do a hangout. We'll do a hangout. We'll talk, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll get some insider pictures for you.
Well, I mean, it's a great experience going to an event. The first time I went to an event, it was very special, and it was actually the Women's British Open, and I was very impressed with the way it was run. Um, the facilities for the media on site are superb, and I think it'll be even better with the USGA. But our coverage is extensive. We have an enormous June edition where we talk about Phil Mickelson's quest for the Grand Slam. The article's called Phil Mickelson, Pinehurst, and the Circle of Life. It's very much revolving around that day when he lost at Pinehurst. He hadn't won a major. His child was born the next day or the next week. And then you go through with all his major wins, and then it comes round to this pivotal moment in history where he could become, I think it's the sixth player to win the Grand Slam. Really the place where it all began, the first place where he really had a serious run at a major. We'll
Right.
also be talking about the US Open champion born in St Andrews, one of which is the former tenant, or former owner, I would say, actually, of the place I'm sitting in right now. Many years ago, Laureate Taloni, he won the 1902 US Open. We'll also be comparing Pinehurst and St Andrews. Pinehurst is known as the home of American golf, and there's a massive marketing campaign revolving around that. And obviously, the home of golf is St Andrews. And obviously, Elizabeth will be previewing the US Women's Open for us, and we'll have extensive coverage of both tournaments throughout the 2 weeks on standrewsgolfmagazine.com and on our social media feeds. So, but we're all looking forward to it. It's a great opportunity for everybody. And then 2 weeks later, I'll be off to Germany for the BMW International Open, where I will also be providing coverage on a daily basis on our website and getting some interviews for future editions. So it's a big summer coming up, and we're all looking forward to it. So, but from myself and Elizabeth, for this evening, it is good night.
Good night, Matt.